Good afternoon, everyone. We'll get started here. Hello, my name is John Fenn. I'm the head of research and programs at the American Folklife Center in the Library of Congress. And on behalf of our director, Nicole Saylor, and all of the staff at the center, several of whom are here, I'd like to welcome you to today's presentation, which is part of our ongoing Benjamin A. Botkin Folklife Lecture Series. Before we begin today's program, though, let me tell you a little bit about the Library of Congress and the American Folklife Center. The Library of Congress is the largest library in the world and the nation's oldest federal cultural institution. Our mission is to engage, inspire, and inform Congress and the American people with a universal and enduring source of knowledge and creativity. The American Folklife Center is a division within the library that functions as the nation's Center for Folklife Documentation and Research. Established by Congress in 1976 to preserve and present folklife, we carry out this directive by stewarding archival collections, creating public programs such as this one, and exchanging knowledge and expertise through various services and to the field. The Archive of Folk Culture is a significant repository for ethnographic materials, housing about 7 million items of cultural documentation, spanning the 19th century to the present. This year, the American Folklife Center is not only celebrating our 50th anniversary with a range of public programs and a large-scale exhibit opening in September just upstairs in the Great Hall, but we are looking forward to the next 50 years of this vital cultural institution and archival repository. Back to today's lecture. The Botkin series allows us to learn from scholars and practitioners whose work touches the disciplines of folklore, ethnomusicology, oral history, and cultural documentation writ large. The lectures are also an important part of the acquisition activities for both the center and the library. Each lecture is recorded to video and will become part of our online resources. After being processed, this lecture, like the others in the Botkin series, will be posted to the library's website, where it will be available without charge to internet patrons throughout the world. So, please remember to turn off your cell phones and any other noise-making devices you have, lest you be captured in the recording. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing Greg Harris, who is the president and chief executive officer of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and Museum in Cleveland, Ohio. Mr. Harris joined the institution's staff in 2008 and has been president since 2012. His responsibilities include overseeing everything, from general operations, exhibits, and fundraising to the high visibility Hall of Fame induction celebrations and the acquisition of important archival collections. Before joining the Rock Hall, Harris spent 14 years on the archival and leadership team at the equally renowned National Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum in Cooperstown, New York. But of equal note, and one of the reasons we have invited him to be part of this series, is because he trained as a folklorist and received a master's degree from the folklore program at the Cooperstown Graduate Program for History and Museum Studies. In many ways, he continues to bring a folklorist sensibility to his professional work, and I gather he's going to talk a little bit about that today. He will also talk about how shared knowledge among audience members at large cultural gatherings like concerts and sports events helps to create community. This Botkin lecture is part of our Folklife Center's 50th anniversary celebrations, and we are delighted to feature programming highlighting and celebrating our sister institutions like the Rock Hall that preserve and promote culture and performance throughout the world. Again, thank you for coming to today's event, and please join me in welcoming Greg Harris.
Boy, thank you for that very generous introduction. And I do need to do a quick fact check. The degree is in History Museum Studies, and I took a lot of folk classes, but it doesn't say folklore, and I'll get into that on why. But thank you all for being here. What an honor to stand here on the 50th year of the American Folklife Center and to be talking about rock and roll and baseball. And then as an individual, I'm going to run through a bit of my background. It's especially exciting for me having studied folklore with some names that will be very familiar to many of you, and having sort of this chance to connect all those dots in my own career to stand here today. Now, the title of today's talk is That Seat Taken? And it's an invigorating introductory phrase. You know, what it says is, hello, I'm here, but it says hello. That we exist, we're at the same event, at the same time, in the same era. It's likely that we have shared values. If you're at this concert that I'm at, if you're at this game, maybe. Same language, the same stories, the same phrases, perhaps even aspects of our life's journey that led us to that point to be sitting next to each other at the game. And it's a natural. How many times have you seen this band? Like, that's a start. Me Too started with The River. That was the first show. What about other tours? What are the dates? Are those lyrics tattooed on your arm? Now, fans around you might be employed up the street at the patent office in DC, or they might be, landscapers from Texas or bankers, diverse backgrounds, but at that moment in time, at that game or that event, that's your community. And that community might even be stronger than your work community away from there. And that's the power of this. At the ballpark, it's an overture for common ground. And even if they're rooting for the other team, you're familiar with the right language to share with each other, the collective memory of superstitions, the collective memory if you're sitting in Baltimore and you say 21-31. Everybody knows, right? It's right there. If the pitcher's doing great late in the game, don't say it's a no-hitter. Don't say it. Then there's that other elevation piece of it, and I'll stick with Baltimore. It gets so deep in people that there's plenty of kids running around Baltimore now named Cal and named Brooks, right? That's serious material culture to carry those names, right? So these powerful communities, and we can attend these games anywhere, and we can find that common ground instantly. And there's that shared lexicon, references, stories, jokes, everything else. So, that's kind of the basis for this. I'm honored to be here and to be part of this lecture series. And for celebrated folklorist Ben Botkin, I think you gave a nice overview. But what I want to share is a quote from Botkin, and that's from his anthology of A Treasury of Western Folklore. Folklore is an imaginative expression that is part of, not apart from the mainstream of culture in a given time and place. Not simply isolated, small groups that are there. It can be part of the bigger culture and connected. And I think those of you that I see heads nodding have been studying this for a lot longer than I have, understand that. That's why it can include pop culture figures. It can include graffiti artists. It can cast a wide net from all regions and all fields, including the streets, not just the fields. Now, I've been fortunate to work for two great institutions over the last 32 years. Both are popular culture museums. By the way, another fact check. In the listing for today, I think somebody had me as the president of the Baseball Hall of Fame as well. I appreciate the promotion, but I was not. Just part of the senior team there. But these places are repositories of public history. Songs, stories, material culture items, concert t-shirts, team logos. We have our saints, Buddy, Richie, Eddie, Janice, Jimmy, just like baseball has it. These museums mix sound and image with artifacts and context, and pair them with knowledge and associations that we all carry within us to create impactful learning experiences. So we celebrate and honor those that can write the most impactful music, in our sense, hit the most home runs, throw the ball the fastest, stand as heroes and idols to many. And these museums share their story, but probably as important or even more so, they share our story. All of us as fans, what it means to attend an opening day, to follow the rituals so that the team season starts correctly, what it means when we all sing along with like-minded people in a stadium to songs that we embraced alone through our radio speaker. We heard it alone, and then we went to the big community. Really amazing. And since today's lecture is part of the 50th anniversary of the American Folklife Center, well, actually, I gotta show you where I've been. That's there we go. There's the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We're going to talk about that for a bit. Nice I.M. Pei pyramid. His other noted pyramid is at the Louvre, the center of Europe's great art, Mona Lisa and everything. This is the center of America's great art, rock and roll. Baseball Hall of Fame, bucolic. That brick is modeled after the brick from Colonial Williamsburg. It's what you did when you built a museum to an American institution in 1939. I want to take a minute to give you a bit more of my background. And it's really a chance for me to recognize some of the pioneers of American folklore that helped shape my career, helped me develop an interpretive lens that impacts everything that I do today. And it values content, meaning, and purpose. And my background, quickly, is I attended Temple University, where one of my work study jobs was in the audio room of the university library. Does anybody remember sneaking in the audio room? And but that was my job, so I got paid to sit there, a couple quarters an hour. and I devoured every Smithsonian Folkways record because they owned them all, was transfixed by Harry Smith's Anthology of American Folk Music. I can ask for a show of hands. That one was the Bible. And the librarian, Steve Landstreet, really steered me in the right direction. Away from the library and away from the classes, I found my primary community. And that was in punk rock and the rockabilly bands and our dress and our vocabulary and the art we liked and the clubs we went to, places like City Gardens in Trenton, New Jersey. Like a lot of folks, that really lit a fire in me, and so I dropped out of college and I opened up a used record store. That's what you did 40-something years ago. And I was quickly immersed in another community, the people that loved music and that indie lifestyle. Musicians all, lots of oral traditions, lots of time spent at the store. And everybody had a specific expertise, but you knew what they loved because of how they talked about it, what they wore, what they thought about. And the store became a great community center and general store. After the store, I became a band's road manager, which was part of a national network of touring bands in vans, not in buses. And you knew people in every record store around the country, every venue, every college radio station, another amazing community. By the way, most of those college radio people are running the music industry today. A few years later, I returned to finish my undergraduate degree, and this is where I really get connected to this place. My professor and advisor was a fellow named Alan Davis, great public historian, and he exposed me to what material culture is and what folklore is, and all with an emphasis on everyday people. It derailed my plans of attending law school, which most history people do, and I got enamored of the idea that folklorists get to produce festivals, they record sessions, they gather oral histories, they create exhibits, they write, they teach. Who would not want to do that? So instead of law school, I applied to the folklore program at the University of Pennsylvania. And I received a crisp acceptance letter from Kenneth Goldstein into the PhD program. I still have that letter. Maybe I can reactivate. So in my meeting with Kenny, he offered an alternate path. Defer the PhD program, go north to the Cooperstown graduate program and get your master's and return here for a PhD. And I since learned this was a path that others have followed, including great folklorist Elaine F. of the Baltimore Screen fame, really wonderful work, and Henry Glassy was first Cooperstown and then Penn. The Cooperstown program was founded in the early 60s by Dr. Lewis C. Jones as a museum studies and folklore combined program. Any Cooperstown grads here? No, we didn't advertise it well enough on our side. But Lewis Jones believed that museum professionals should embrace folk culture and social history. And by the time I attended, the MA was History Museum Studies, strong in social history and material culture, and most important, there were remnants of the folklore program that was thriving in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, but it's since stopped being there. They had a great library collection of all those pieces, and a recently retired professor, Dr. Bruce Buckley, who was a noted folklorist, and here's the thing I found about Bruce, he was a Smithsonian's Folkways recording artist. Ohio River Valley Murder Ballads. The record came out about 1958, and it's here in the collection, and thanks to the great mandate, it's still in print because everything's available. So he later gets his PhD, becomes this folklore professor, and I was fortunate enough to study with him through independent studies, frequently at his kitchen table, and that's where I got my field methods. He handed me this original Folklife piece of yours from 1976, and this was a little bit of an introduction to field techniques, which I think some of you may have grabbed on the way in. It's been updated by Steve Winnick of the Folklife Center, and it's available out there. But Bruce gave me that. I got open to this whole world of things. And the great thing is kind of like Botkin, we were into the traditional pieces, but Bruce was also very fascinated by why people put pink plastic flamingos in their yard. And the fact that a pop culture item like that could be a folk expression when exhibited and announcing to the world and showing your community. So I was really interested in the stuff that Bruce was sharing. I was fortunate to get a great grounding from him, and that has shaped who I am and how I think about things today. Since then, I've had the good fortune to serve in leadership roles as noted at the Baseball Hall of Fame and Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Two of the things that really come through with baseball and rock and roll is the idea of the origin story, right? The big origin story. It's kind of a powerful platform. I think you all know that origin stories spark awe, they spark wonder. Evolutionary change just doesn't have the same exciting impact. Typically, it is evolutionary change, right? Everything builds on each other, but you want this big moment for a lot of reasons. And with the tip of the cap to Stephen Jay Gould, let's look at the origin stories of baseball and rock and roll. And baseball's great creation myth vaults into the world in 1905 when a former professional baseball player and sporting goods business owner, Albert Spalding, is debating with Henry Chadwick, a British-born sports writer, on where did baseball start. Chadwick says, I grew up playing rounders as a kid in the UK. It's clearly evolutionary. Spalding's like, it's American. At that time, we were kind of in an isolationist mode. And it really was important that to Spalding, and maybe important to business, he felt like he wanted to be American. So this debate goes on. In 1905, they actually established a commission called the Mills Commission that Major League Baseball sanctions, or the National League sanctions. And the committee hears testimony. They don't learn a whole lot. It takes them a couple years. And there's one person's testimony, a person named Abner Graves, that said, I was 6 years old at the time in 1839, and I was in a field in Cooperstown, New York, and Abner Doubleday, Major General Abner Doubleday, laid out the diamond. And that commission said, that's it, done. Baseball started in Cooperstown in 1839. Abner Doubleday, some of you may know, was never in Cooperstown. And in his works that he later wrote about his life, he never mentioned baseball. But he was an Army leader. He was in the Civil War. And he's noted for being the person that gave the command to the Union Army to return fire at Fort Sumter at the start of the Civil War. So he was involved in starting something. He later went on to serve in Gettysburg, Antietam, and had an honorable career and rose to be a major general. And at the time, he was kind of the perfect person. He embodied American exceptionalism. Our isolationist leanings. They said it was him, and that was that. So the fun part with this is little happened with that from 1907 onward. Not much happened. But in the 20s, the town decided, you know what, the field where that supposedly happened in town, we're going to build a wooden ballpark. We're going to call it Doubleday Field. And that's where sort of the myth goes away and things start happening. They build this field, kids can play on it, they do some special things there, and then nothing really happens, just a quick blip. Then in the middle 30s, 1930s, there's a little baseball that's found in a house outside of Cooperstown that's from the 1800s. And they say, you know what, that's the Doubleday baseball. And they put it on exhibit in the village library, and people start coming to see the ball. So when people start, that's where things start picking up steam. So people start traveling into town to look at this baseball at the village library offices. And the marketers kind of get in the mix. People realize that it's 1839 was the start. We're in the 1930s. What if in 1939 we have a 100th celebration of baseball? And that's what they do. And it coincides with some fundraising done in Cooperstown to build a museum for this baseball and all the other great pieces from the game. And that's truly how this place opens up, is they build this museum, the ball is a centerpiece, and it becomes this mecca for everybody. This is from 1939. The baseball centennial becomes this massive thing that's celebrated from the little leagues and the college teams, minor leagues and major leagues all celebrate the 100th anniversary of baseball. It's an amazing sort of nationwide experience. For those that look at footage, if you see a patch or a photo with a centennial patch, you know it's 1939. But that's when the Hall of Fame opened, and all of the greats that were alive at the time came to dedicate the building. You had Babe Ruth and Ty Cobb and Honus Wagner, Cy Young, just this. And that's what happens. It opens, and here's where it goes from being just the origin story to being the true mythic home of baseball, and it's Cooperstown. Forget the origin story. It's there because since 1939, all of the greats have gone there. They've all been enshrined there. We've all hopefully visited there. It's this mecca for everybody, and moving forward, origin or not, it's the spiritual home of baseball. When you walk the streets of Cooperstown, you know, these saints are celebrated in souvenir shops and on banners and in the Baseball Hall of Fame. The pilgrims to town wear the vestments of their favorite teams. Some walk around in almost full baseball uniforms. Others play catch in the shadow of the museum. You know, it's this magical place. And inside the Hall of Fame, strangers speak with strangers. Grandparents speak to grandchildren. They share the stories of who they saw play, who they've met, frequently on Main Street, and when they had that brush with greatness. So it's really kind of magical that it's in this space. And I have to share, it was such a big story that Doubleday ends up 100 years later on the cover of Newsweek magazine. And couldn't resist while putting this together, since it's baseball and rock and roll. Another noted Newsweek cover was The Making of a Rock Star with Bruce. And with that, we're going to kick a little bit over to the rock and roll portion of the program. Out in Cleveland, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame celebrates the sound of youth culture and the music that connects us all. And in this continent, on our continent, it can be from Baja to Boston, Seattle to Saratoga, Chicago to San Antonio, and globally it cuts across all geography, income, ethnicity, party lines, national borders. Doesn't care if you fly coach, it doesn't care if you fly private. Rock and roll is a sound and a spirit, and most of all, it's an attitude. And we'll get into that a little bit with rock and roll. I think many of you know it was born from the collision of blues, gospel, country, and R&B. It has its own murky origin story. Lots of folks like to debate, what was the first rock and roll record? Is it Rocket 88? Is it Wynonie Harris, Rock Me Baby? Does it go back further to Sister Rosetta Tharpe, the guitar-slinging gospel contemporary of the great Mahalia Jackson, both of them in the Hall of Fame? Or was it, or was it, or was it, or was it? It just keeps going. And whatever was the first sound, there's another origin story that, like all great origin stories, does have a shred of truth to it, and certainly has relevance of why the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is in Cleveland, Ohio. It's because there's a radio DJ broadcasting in the early 50s from Cleveland, and he played rhythm and blues and jump blues records on the radio to a diverse audience of rabid teenagers. The DJ was Alan Freed. And like Doubleday, he's erroneously been identified as the individual who coined the phrase rock and roll. He didn't invent it, but he did popularize it. And rock and roll appears in sheet music in the 19th century. And for those that want to dig deep, it's, I think back then, the earliest it was in reference to sort of a ship's rocking and rolling, and it's used in songs. It soon becomes a euphemism for sex and is used in a lot of places. And you've heard it, rock me with one steady roll. Let's rock and roll all night, roll with me. It's on Edison cylinders in the 1890s. It's rock and roll. It's referenced in 1922 blues recordings. And then multiple artists, even artists like Benny Goodman, Count Basie, Chick Webb, and others, rock and roll is in the lyrics. So it isn't as if Freed came up with it, but he did popularize it. He blew it up, in fact. He moved from outside of Cleveland and Akron, Ohio to Cleveland, and then to New York City and the world. He lit up the radio waves, and every teen within range could hear the same thing. Everybody could hear the same music. And it didn't matter who you were, where you were. If you had a radio, you could hear the same music as each other. It didn't matter what neighborhood you were in. You could be suburban, rural, or urban. You could hear the same thing. And it created a community of teenagers that loved and connected with rock and roll. And Freed became so popular that he started flying to New York to do his show. And really, at that point, we all owe him a debt of gratitude as the individual that popularized the phrase rock and roll. And he played it, again, for both white and black teenagers. I think you might be able to see in that photo. And he also promoted concerts. He starred in films. He received top billing over artists like Chuck Berry and others. But speaking of origin stories, Freed does get one really wonderful one to his credit. We can celebrate him for putting on what is universally thought of as the very first rock and roll concert. And that concert was the Moondog Coronation Ball in Cleveland Arena, March 21st, is it 1952? 51, 52? Any fact checkers here? 51. So in 1951, and an amazing lineup, and it's at Cleveland Arena in 1951. So he starts the first rock and roll show. It's the Moondog Coronation Ball with multiple bands from the Cleveland area. His on-air name was he was the King of the Moondoggers, and he picked up that moniker. Now, the other great part about this show is that they're acknowledged for having the first rock and roll show. The venue held about 10,000 people, but roughly 20,000 showed up. And it famously resulted in rock and roll's first riot, with audience capacity exceeding the venue limits, and chaos erupted. Here's a shot from some of the show. They did manage to get some music together, but it was stopped pretty quickly. I think the whole concert itself was, I'm not sure if it made it past the 20-minute mark. And that's sort of a great origin stories too, because it does show the passion, the spirit, the energy, and a little bit of the truth behind it. Now, I do want to hit on it quickly, that beyond the origin story, some things about what is rock and roll, because that tends to come up in every conversation with everybody. And in the broader context, it's really a sound. It's not really one sound. It's a spirit, and most of all, it's an attitude. And I want to take a look at what that attitude means. Rock and roll gains a musical identity in the late 40s and 50s with jump blues artists like Louis Jordan, Lionel Hampton, and even Texas swing of Bob Wills. They mixed boogie woogie and stride piano, James Booker, Professor Longhair, and Fats, early recordings in 49. And Freed and other DJs start blasting this race music to young people throughout the USA. Freed was doing it, but it was also happening with other DJs in other towns as well. And rock and roll starts to get an identity as a section in record store bins, in internal memos at record companies, and agencies as the sound of youth, the music that the demographic bump we come to be known as the baby boomers quickly fall in love with. And they had spending money, and they had time to spare. These record executives soon realized if they could reach them, there was money to be made. Shows were organized, films were shot, fanzines were launched, DJs were paid, and the music thrived. The interesting twist is that while it needs to be categorized for the trades and the stores, the real first generation of rock and roll artists was a fair number of nonconformists. Ike Turner, Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Buddy Holly, Carl Perkins, Jerry Lee, Eddie Cochran. They throw gas on this fire. And while rock and roll began as a designation about a musical style, it really became a push against conformity and closed-mindedness. It grew beyond a genre to reflect an attitude, to reflect freedom writ large, the freedom to follow your own voice, to voice your disagreement, to protest norms you thought were oppressive or simply ridiculous. And rock and roll for the last 70 years has grown to come to mean attitude. And attitude, in a way, can become more important than the specific sound of the music. So it's always been diverse sounds, and it isn't one sound. In the 50s, rock and roll had haunting doo-wop, street corner harmony, and rip-roaring rockabilly. In the 60s, it has Otis Redding, Southern Soul, and others like that. The Mamas and the Papas and Sunshine Harmonies, along with the Detroit Revolution of Iggy and the Stooges. It's all called rock and roll. In the 70s, singer-songwriters stole our hearts, right next to electronica, disco, and punk rock. In the 80s, we bring in hardcore, industrial, new wave hip-hop. In the 90s and to the future, we go beyond with grunge, EDM, more hip-hop, and more. The river keeps going, and rock and roll pushes the envelope. It's always changing, it's always evolving, but it always has an attitude. And it really is, to each of us, something different. You know, it could be Aretha demanding respect, Carole King's heartbreak and longing, Patti Smith exclaiming that the electric guitar is the most powerful weapon of my generation, the Ramones' hopped-up surf guitars and short, crisp songs, the MC5 playing to the people at the 1968 Democratic Convention in Chicago. It's soul, blues, country, disco, punk, metal, grunge, jangle pop, industrial, and hip-hop. It's all that and more. And it's not specifically a sound, it's an attitude. It's the voice of hope, it's the voice of change, it's the voice of rebellion. And all of it comes together. You know, at its best, though, it's recognized as the sound of freedom, signifying hope, the power to change, and the bravery of defiance. And because of its power to unite and inspire, it may be our most powerful export to the world. When the Berlin Wall was being torn down, it was the music that was blasting as sledgehammers rang. It's the sound of young people in China celebrating Bob Dylan's birthday with clandestine guitar circles, singing his songs. It's a Ukrainian punk rock band recording the Clash song London Calling and calling it Kiev Calling. And it's Joe Strummer and the Clash being gifted a car by a promoter and giving it to the local union hall. By presenting hopes and dreams, the music has always questioned the status quo. It's helped listeners believe that something bigger and better is possible. Let's go move to some of the material culture. And the material culture of baseball fans includes their team uniforms, vestments, caps, warm-ups, baubles, ballpark food, peanuts and Cracker Jacks, pretty much the same nationally at every ballpark with some regional variations. But in Anaheim, they wear cowboy hats because of Gene and Jackie Autry. In Baltimore, they play John Denver's Thank God I'm a Country Boy, right? And the song isn't a natural fit for that city, but it's been a staple from as far back as 1975. And it's kind of has achieved mythic status as a piece of the Baltimore Orioles material culture. And it was pantomimed by players with baseball gear as instruments from the top of a dugout in 1975. And I guess the story goes that they tried to not play it at times, and the team wouldn't win. So they kept playing it. And Earl Weaver, I guess he was programming the music, because he asked them after losing, like, why didn't you play Country Boy today? And he said, keep playing it. And it's wonderful Baltimore folklore that they feel it helped the O's win the World Series in 1983. And it's a long time ago, 1983, but it's persisted to this day. In some attempts to interrupt it, they've tried. They've all failed, and tradition prevails, right? So it's still being played there. If anybody was at the game last night, I'm sure they played it. I don't know if they won or not, but they did it. And the material culture of rock and roll varies depending on your community. Rock and roll has so many different pockets and voices. Metal fans have a distinct look and feel, by and large, that's different than those that love 50s garage rock or rockabilly. Northern soul dancers have a different look. It gets narrowcast. Punk, there's a punk look, there's a new wave look, there's a goth look, there's a ska look, it's all there. But the items that are tied to that, the dress, the jewelry, the body art today, hairstyles, all connect, and they help people find their community through sound, image, and purpose. And I think that I'd like to bring this home by leaving you with a material culture piece that connects all of us before taking some questions. And as we got, oh, you know what? I skipped over some things. Hang on, I couldn't resist it. It's Baltimore. Here's the music fans at our place with our summer stage. And talk about objects, right? And this whole concept of the finding your tribe, there's something magical. This was taken at the Fairly Well shows, I believe, in Chicago when the Grateful Dead was moving toward retirement, and then resurged as, what did they change their name to? Dead and Company. Thank you very much. And then I love when things in our world collide, because this is just perfect, right? That's a person I want to sit next to. I think we'd have a lot to talk about. And it started in San Fran, rightfully so, in the Bay Area, and it's now taken over. I believe almost all teams are doing this thing, and it's just magical. But to bring us back, there's a piece that connects all of us. And as I was setting this up, I was so pleased that everybody from the Folklife Center, and when I mentioned, I started playing this, and I heard it across the room, and it's about Doc Pomus. And Doc Pomus, in most circles, isn't a household name, but maybe in these circles he is, because people appreciate his work as a songwriter, and his collection resides at the Library of Congress, right? Now Doc is a member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for his incredible talent as a songwriter. Lou Reed, Bob Dylan have praised him as, America's greatest songwriter. He wrote, while you may not know his name, you'll know his music. Many remarkable songs, including This Magic Moment, Viva Las Vegas, Teenager in Love, and so on and so on. Really, I have to pause. It's exciting this collides with the collection here at the Library of Congress. Doc had polio as a child, and he used leg braces and crutches his entire life. At his wedding in the 1950s, he watched his new bride dance with her father, dance with her brother, dance with the best man. And because of his crutches and his infirmity, he couldn't truly dance with her. Instead, he took the table card out of the centerpiece. Table card, I'm told, is in the collection here. And he wrote across it 6 simple words: save the last dance for me. Right? So when I say those 6 words, it doesn't matter where you were born, what school you attended, you hear the song, Save the Last Dance for Me. And it might spark a memory for you of a dance partner or a memorable road trip or some magic moment. And when it does, our collective memories mix together. And Doc's moment in love, the great vocals of the Drifters all mix together, and we all become richer for it. That's the power of material culture, the power and magic of rock and roll. And it's the moment where pop culture and the community of all who love rock and roll combine. And I think that Ben Boykin would approve. Let's hear the song.
You can dance every dance with the guy who gives you the eye, let him hold you tight. You can smile every smile for the man who held your hand neath the pale moonlight. But don't forget who's taking you home and in whose arms you're gonna be. So darling, save the last dance for me. Oh, I know that the music's fine, like sparkling wine. Go and have your fun. Laugh and sing. But while we're apart, don't give your heart to anyone. But don't forget who's taking you home and in whose arms you're gonna be. So darling, save the last dance for me. Baby, don't you know I love you so?
Verse, sorry.
Can't you
Gotta let
feel
it
it
go.
when we touch? I will never, never let you go. I love you oh so much. You can dance, go and carry on till the night is gone and it's time to go. If he asks, if you're all alone, can he take you home? You must tell him no. 'Cause don't forget who's taking you home and in whose arms you're gonna be. So darling, say the last dance for me.
All right. Well, thank you all for your time. And thank you. We have microphones and we're recording, so use a mic so we can hear you and watch what you say because we're recording.
Thank you, that was great. Anybody have questions? Raise your hand, wait for the microphone to come.
Thank you. Hi, I actually have two real quick. One, have you been to an O's game when they sang the national anthem?
With the big
And
O?
how they've adapted, quote, folklore into the second O, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, yes, that is Baltimore only. And if you even go to a Maryland game and there's Baltimore people, they will do the same thing.
I'm going to tell you, if Baltimore is playing the Guardians, your fans do it there too,
That's
in our
right.
stadium.
And the second thing, just to byway and Save the Last Dance for me reminded me, they have found, and I've experienced this with a friend, that as Alzheimer's and dementia, they might forget everything else, but they can still remember the old songs that were a part of their lives.
Yeah.
That rock and roll.
It's deep within us. It really is. And we actually have one of Doc's saxophones on exhibit in a photo, and we have a table card. We're going to have to figure out who has the copy and who has the authentic one, but there's still a power and a magic in the story, and to connect that context with the audio just creates a full picture. But then you connect it with all the times we've all heard that song. It's really meaningful.
Well, thank you very much. Do you do any interaction with the Grateful Dead archives at the University of California, Santa Cruz?
Somewhat, but we've borrowed from them. We've have some supporters at both places that have been wonderful, but not a lot, no. And if I remember right, there was a slow build for them to get things cataloged and accessible and available. You're nodding your head. That I think that was a little bit of the needed done. I've lost track on if that's finished now and if they're all accessible and available or not. I don't know. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Good afternoon. It's such an honor to meet you, and I'm so glad that I can't imagine that you would be out and doing lectures, and I just wanted to say thank you for that. I am also really impressed with as you were doing the baseball, we all love baseball, but when you mentioned some of the era pieces of rockabilly, and I wanted to know how that is transpiring. We're working with a lot of historian research, Chris and I, and he has, and we want to see more focus on that blending of those genres. And maybe you've heard of Henry Glover. He was a very, well, it's my father.
Oh,
I'm Sherry Glover Thompson. And we now have evolved into the next project, and that's pulling it all together. And it's been so exciting. And I just want to thank you that you've got the foresight to be a part of that and a part of bringing that back.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. There we go. This side of the room is really doing it, guys. You're a little slow over here. Yes.
And I'm sorry if I missed it, but why did you choose Cleveland for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? I understand Cooperstown, but why Cleveland?
Yeah. So the Cleveland itself, to back up from even the Freed story, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame started in New York City in the 80s. And it was a dinner each year at the Waldorf. Ahmet Ertegun, founder of Atlantic Records, DC native, and Jan Winter and others in the music industry made a night to honor rock and roll's own. And they started having inductions and just a celebration. And the idea of having a museum popped up In New York, they were offered a couple brownstones, but it's just so big of a story that it wasn't going to work. And the word went out and cities started bidding on it. Just like you'd bid today to attract a corporate headquarters or to attract a major event, all the cities competed. My hometown, Philadelphia, jumped in and said, we were the American Bandstand, Cameo Parkway Records, Philly Soul, Gamble and Huff, yes. New Orleans jumped in, arguably the home of rock and roll. Was DC in the mix?
I think so. The Beatles played the Coliseum here. We're also the Bat Raising from Fugazi.
Yeah, important bands. So many cities had the passion pitch for why it should be there. Cleveland had Alan Freed, as I noted. It also had a great concert business in Northeast Ohio. A lot of the touring things were focused there. It was the place where David Bowie played his first shows as Ziggy Stardust in the US. Rush's first US shows are Cleveland. Jimi Hendrix when he comes back. It's just a great FM radio station that really galvanized the community. But what swayed it, all these communities had heart. Cleveland showed up with a business plan. Said, here's how we're going to build it. Here's what it's going to mean to the region. And the short story is that the group in New York accepted them, said, you win. This $35 million proposal you gave us is terrific, but you need to hire Ian Pei. He's the hottest architect going, as it went from 35 to 65 million instantly. Before it was done, it was 90-something million dollars. But since opening in 1995, we've hosted over 15 million people at the museum. Every single year, our economic impact is significantly greater than the $90 million one-time impact they put in. In fact, today it's $240 million in economic impact to the region. And it is now, like Cooperstown, it's the home.
It's wonderful.
So that's why it's there. And there's direct flights, everybody, so come visit us. Yes?
Hi, you touched during your talk about radio and the shared experience of everyone hearing the same song at a particular time. Have we lost that with the growth and advent of streaming services and everyone curating their own experience, really?
I think we've lost some of it. There's been some pickup in other ways, but we have. It wasn't just radio. In the 80s, MTV did that as well. Everybody, wherever you were, saw the same people wearing the same things, playing the same music. Now, the unfortunate part is what happens to regional variation, right? What happens when it becomes that broad-based? So that's a bit of a challenge. Today, in listening, it's a lot more singles than artists. You're using playlists that others have done, or you're using your own stuff. So there isn't that same rallying cry for a single voice speaking to the entire community in the way that radio did. Yeah, that's definitely missing. One of the trade-offs is the accessibility. That meant you had to listen to whatever they put through that little speaker in your dashboard, right? Now you can go on your phone and you can draw from much of the music of the world in that second. And you can do it sitting at your kitchen table with your laptop. So it's a bit of a back and forth. A friend that's a big blues fan, massive lifetime blues person, like a lot of us, had his record wish list folded up on a piece of paper in his wallet. And when traveling, you go in record stores looking for, that missing 78 or that missing release, and you try and find them. And he said to me a couple years ago, my 18-year-old daughter knows more about the blues than I will ever know. He'd been searching for decades. His daughter was a musician, was a teenager, but would go online. You're suddenly watching Son House in a recording that maybe was at a Folklife event. And then there's a link to see, from that to Howlin' Wolf playing on a Canadian TV show in the early 60s. And then it goes on, and pretty soon you're reading comments and you're connecting, and you're just, all this stuff is accessible. So it's a trade-off. And accessibility is remarkable because of what you can find and what you can gather, but that unifying singular voice to an entire community, it's definitely not the same.
Two more questions.
Okay.
Hi.
Make them good.
Thank you very much for coming out. I really appreciate it. I had kind of a footnote and a question as well. I wanted to mention that my great-grandfather's childhood baseball bat is at Cooperstown in the archives.
Really?
Yes.
Tell me why.
He was just a fan. He was very good friends with J.G. Taylor Spink. He attended my grandparents' wedding. I have the gift that he gave my grandparents. Yeah, he was just a fan. He had an obituary in the Sporting News. He was at the opening of the Hall of Fame with my grandmother.
Wow.
Who, God bless her, is almost 95.
Wow.
Yep.
It's not Sam Rice, is it?
No, his
Okay.
name was Abe Obstfeld.
Yes. Well, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
You need to go up and visit it.
I have.
Oh,
I got to
wonderful.
hold it.
Yeah.
Yes. So my question is on the other part of your lecture about rock and roll, my other favorite thing. With the recent restoration and release of 1970s concert footage as well as earlier 50s 8mm footage of Elvis Presley, I was wondering if you all have done any exhibitions or coordinated any other efforts with the folks over at Graceland.
Yeah. We have a wonderful relationship with the folks at Graceland, and they loan us things. They're pretty comprehensive in what they own, and so they loan us material, and we change it frequently in our exhibits to keep it fresh. The last footage that I'm aware of that we received through them was a piece about Elvis called The Searcher. That was a great, interesting film produced by John Landau. And that was the most recent stuff. But our featured exhibits at the museum right now, we just opened a Paul McCartney and Wings exhibit. It's the largest assemblage of Paul McCartney materials ever in history, and it's at the museum. It opened a couple weeks ago. And then we have another exhibition that is Talk About the Singular Box. It's Saturday Night Live, 50 years of music. And in addition to having important pieces from Saturday Night Live that are tied to musical sketches, band performances, even things like the Sinead photo we have, the more cowbell and things like that we have. But we also have every performance that was ever on Saturday Night Live, which if you watch them online now, most of the music has been pulled out because it was cleared for that show only and not for future broadcast. You can stand at kiosk and watch, I think it's 1,900 performances inside the museum. So another reason why, and there's 3 planes a day that leave DC and go to Cleveland. Thank you.
One more question.
I was touring around with the Grateful Dead, and my goal when I would visit a city would be to check out the great museums in that town. Yeah. But my traveling partner, his goal, of course, was to visit all the great baseball stadiums in the country. So we were a good match, and we worked it out pretty well. You were talking about the first Alan Freed concert and the mayhem and all that, and that they were playing to a multiracial crowd.
Yes.
Well, I thought it was interesting that the Dominoes were on there, because I understand that Billy Ward and his Dominoes were an early multiracial band.
Yep.
And then years later, of course, Arthur Lee and Love came along in the 60s.
That's right. Yep.
And I thought you might want to speak a little bit more about the racial makeup or the diversity of the influential founding bands.
Yeah.
And also, I'll squeeze in a couple more if I may. I'll be quick. I've learned about a band called The Who, but not The Who we're familiar with. I'm talking about the Who HU, and they're a Mongolian metal band that incorporates throat singing into their music.
Yeah.
And much like bluegrass music was imported to Japan, I find it fascinating that metal music has made it all the way to Mongolia. So, and then the final question is, has Little Feat finally gotten into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame yet?
I guess I'll hit the last one first. How's that? There's always great discussion of who's elected and who's not elected to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And it's a very subjective process. But artists are inducted based on impact and influence. And they're frequently, that impact and influence, the measure of it changes through the years. And artists, sometimes there's great gaps between when they're eligible and when they get in. For instance, the great Graham Parsons is going in this year. He's been eligible for a long, long time. And bands like Yes was eligible for decades and finally went in. And so it's not a perfect process, but it's a process that does recognize impact and influence. And the idea, did they take the music and the art form in a new direction? It's one of the reasons why Lou Reed and the Velvet Underground went in much earlier than a number of other bands. Didn't sell that many records. It wasn't based on chart success. It wasn't based on sales. It was based on impact and influence. And famously, people say that those that bought their records then formed bands. And that's the impact and influence. As for music being global now, I think that's amazing. And it's interesting that you talk about Mongolian metal, because we inherently think about export. And it's remarkable to learn that there's all these regional variations of rock and roll around the world, that it isn't just an export, that it should be an import, it should be a back and forth with all of those places. And we're heavily at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame from our origin on the English-speaking countries. But that is changing. We are redoing our whole main exhibition hall. We're underway planning it right now, and we will be opening that in late 7 or early 2008. And one of the goals in there is to tell the global story much better. And it isn't just our global export, it's how it's been embraced around the world and what it means to everybody else. With that, I'm going to thank everybody, and I'm grateful for you being here. Have a great day, everyone.